Councillors, you are now live on YouTube.
Good evening and a warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Borough Council's council meeting. I would like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the local authorities, executive arrangements, meetings and access to information England regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. May I remind all participants that to ensure the audio for the meeting is as clear as possible, all microphones should be muted as a default setting to keep background noise to a minimum. Any councillor who wishes to speak, please raise your hand via the virtual raised hand. We will follow the usual convention of first asking group leaders if they or their allotted colleague wish to speak on an item. When you are asked to speak by the Mayor, please unmute your microphone by clicking on the microphone symbol on the bottom left of the screen. Once you have spoken, please remute your microphone again. In respect of voting, for item 9 on the agenda, Budget and Financial Strategy 2021-22, there will be a recorded vote. When the roll call is required, councillors' names will be called out by Mrs. Tambini. Please confirm your vote by saying for, against, abstain. In respect of the other items on the agenda, any that appear to be uncontentious, I will ask for any councillor to put their virtual hand up if they wish to vote against or abstain. If no one signals, the vote will be taken as carried without the need for a roll call. If a minority signal they wish to vote against or abstain, they will be asked to confirm which. And as long as there is a majority in favour, the vote will be carried without a full roll call. When a roll call is called for, councillors' names will be called out by Mrs. Tambini. In respect of motions, please submit any proposed amendments to motions during the meeting via the chat function to the monitoring officer, Sanjit, me and the Chief Executive. Please also confirm your seconder. Amendments will then be shared to the meeting via PowerPoint for a couple of minutes and will be posted in the chat for your reference during the debate. If anyone wishes to raise a point of order, please do this via the chat function if you can. However, if you are not seen, please inform me. Given the number of items on the agenda, I suggest that we'll have a brief adjournment at around 8:30 p.m. for a 5-minute comfort break. I would now like to move to the first item on the agenda, which is the moment of reflection. I'd like to introduce Meena Hanspel, who volunteers at Guru Nanak's mission, and she will lead us in the moment of reflection.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for inviting me here today. I am Meena. I'm one of the volunteer coordinators with Guru Nanak's mission. For over 6 years, we've been handing out free hot meals to the homeless and hungry. We are entirely run on donations from the local community. GNM follows a Sikh principle of seva, which means selfless service. We're about helping people without wanting anything in return, and we're very proud to have a diverse volunteer base from all faiths and beliefs. Last year, we served over 8,000 hot meals with referrals from many agencies. That's over 150 meals a week. Recently, in collaboration with Salvation Army and SAFE, we're supporting 175 families, 10 Nottingham schools with hot parcels, food parcels, and to date have provided enough food for 1,130 children. GNM is about helping those who need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could Mrs. Tambini report any apologies, please?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Christine Jeffries and Councillor Gordon Moore.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Okay, in that case, we will. Could we please approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 3rd of December 2020? Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I'd like to move the approval of those minutes, please.
Councillor Edivine.
Yes, I'd like to second the approval of those minutes, please.
Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then that is carried. Now we come to my announcements. Not much has occurred since the last full council on the 3rd of December 2020, apart from the various seasonal events and the fact that I did actually meet Elodie, my granddaughter, for the first time outside, but then she lives in Switzerland, so she's used to the winter cold temperatures. Rushcliffe's tree planting scheme has continued, and I visited some trees which were planted on Bridgefield near the former railway embankment in West Bridgeford. And I was also able to indulge in some sledging in January, which was great fun. And I'm hoping for at least some events in the near future. And in a way, the first one was today, because today I had my COVID vaccine at Gampston Health Centre. And thank you to all the marvellous staff organising such a smooth running operation and putting up with me and a photographer. On Saturday, I'm presenting an award for plastic-free Cotgrave in Keyworth. And some of the things that I'm planning to do in the near future, some of the staff from Rushcliffe very kindly visited and took some cards and flowers to Jeannie Richardson of Leewood Manor, who actually celebrated her 108th birthday. So I'll be sending her something and perhaps even visiting. I have started a sponsored event for the Mayor's charities, which I'll remind you are Knott's Wildlife Trust, Music Works and the Trent District Community First Responders. So what I'm going to do is not all at once, but walk round the boundary of Rushcliffe Borough Council, in reality, not virtually. So that's 76 miles. It's quite difficult to get near the boundary in some places, but I'll let you know if I'm passing through your ward, and perhaps we can meet in a physically distanced way and we can record the event. I'm hoping to spend some of my allowance on toilet twinning the toilets at Rushcliffe Arena, which is helping people in poor countries to have proper sanitation. And spring is coming, and I'm hopeful for better times. And in particular, I wish my predecessor, Councillor Christine Jeffries, a speedy recovery from her current illness. Would the leader like to make his announcements, please?
Yes, good evening, Mayor. Good evening, members, and very good luck with the walk. And I'm sure you'll get a lot of support, Madam Mayor. I would just also like to extend and acknowledge the incredible effort of the vaccine rollout. Nationally, we've rolled out over 20 million vaccines, and there's been many, many thousands of vaccines have been now delivered at the Gampston Community Centre. And I think it's a great testament to the communities that have really come together, the volunteers that have made that site work. I've been there myself, and I've had nothing but praise for Rushcliffe in terms of the facilities people in particular, who've really made that a very, very successful operation. And I think it's something that this borough should be very, very proud of in this very, very serious natural pandemic. I'd also, just sticking with the pandemic, Madam Mayor, I'd also just like to tell members I was asked to do an interview last night with the BBC on behalf of Rushcliffe, being recognised for being on the top districts in the whole of the country for our performance in delivering the grants to businesses. Now, right from day one, we recognised that financing for businesses using these grants was absolutely key, and I pay great testament to the officers of Rushcliffe. Many have worked 7 days a week to get these grants out. The discretionary grants, we've actually moved over, we've delivered 100% of those grants to businesses. And in terms of the government grants, which are non-discretionary, over 90%, which has put us as probably the top district in the whole of the country, which is incredible when you think of the size of authorities and things. And I think what that has done for business, the confidence and the many letters I've got is absolutely tremendous. I just wanted to share that with members, and please, Mr. Linfield, and those in the meeting, if you could pass our thanks on behalf of all members for the incredible work that the officers have done from that side. Madam Mayor, I'd just also like to recognise the support from the government as well, particularly from the budget yesterday that we saw. That's going to have an excellent support for residents across Rushcliffe, particularly the extension to the universal credit that was announced, the mortgage support, and of course the stamp duty holiday as well, which is going to help many house buyers across Rushcliffe. I think from a business point of view, also the extension of the furlough scheme, the further grants that Rushcliffe will be handing out obviously very shortly, support for the self-employed, and also of course extending the business rates holiday as well. As I say, we also announced yesterday about a lot more grants going forward, and Rushcliffe will certainly be playing our part in that, in making sure those grants do go out very quickly and effectively. Madam Mayor, it'd be remiss of me not to just talk about the power station at Radcliffe, where we've had two very, very significant announcements this week. First of all, we saw earlier in the week the STEP, the fusion technology. This was what is deemed what's called an expression of interest that the government have asked for, and we've worked with the power station over the last week or so, and that expression of interest has now been lodged with the government. It's the greenest technology that's known to man. I'm not technical, but I think the analogy they gave is this is what powers the stars in the sky. So I think you couldn't get any greener than that. So I think that's fantastic. I do stress this is only a expression of interest. So it's nothing has been agreed. There's no contracts or anything. This is purely the government who've been looking right across the country for sites, and at the moment, Rushcliffe meets a lot of that criteria there at the power station. There will actually be a cabinet paper next Tuesday where we will take this expression, because obviously it does need official recommendation from this from Rushcliffe. And then secondly, the Freeport, and hot off the press, I just had a letter from the chairman of the LEP, and if I could just mention this. Madam Mayor, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to all your continued positive and encouragement. I'm incredibly grateful for the support that's been given to the LEP in actually securing the Freeport application. As many of you aware, I think there were nearly 30 applications for 8 Freeports, and the area around the power station, the airport, and around Toyota is the only inland port that actually got Freeport status. So we're absolutely delighted. It's a great testament to all the region coming together to get that with the LEP, the County Council, and Rushcliffe and the other local authorities as well. Figures of around 60,000 jobs are being quoted, additional jobs to be brought to the area, of which 30,000 will be direct, another 30,000 in the supply chain. So we think this is a great option and a great win for the borough and for that specific area. So there are two very significant developments there at the power station. I do stress to members, the power station is in private hands. It's owned by Uniper, and ultimately they will need to size up both of these options and decide how to proceed and go forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I believe there are no chief executives announcements and there are no citizens' questions. So we'll move on to the leave of absence for Councillor Christine Jeffries, which is an additional item. Councillor Robinson.
Yes, Madam Mayor, unfortunately, I have to bring this agenda item forward. Christine Jeffries is not very well at all. I had a very long conversation with her today, and she's very, very sorry that she's going to not be here tonight. With discussions, we've taken this step to propose the recommendations that are set out with you which basically gives the leave of absence for a further 6 months going forward. So I hope you join me in. I'm certainly wishing Christine Jeffries all the very best, and we really hope to see her back in her glaring best very, very soon. So without any further ado, I'd just like to move those recommendations that are set out in that agenda item there under item 2, A and B. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Gray.
I would like to second the recommendation and also express my sincere wishes to Christine. Hope you get better soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. We're moving straight to a vote on this with no debate. So are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then that is carried.
Madam Mayor, could also just extend our very, very best wishes to Councillor Moore as well and his family. He, as I say, he's got, there are issues, and I'd just like to express our very best to Councillor Moore as well under very difficult circumstances.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Robinson. I wasn't aware of that. I would have mentioned it otherwise. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's quite recent, Madam Mayor, literally only today.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Robinson. So East Midlands Development Corporation, item 8. So again, it's Councillor Robinson, over to you to move, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Members may recall in December 2020, there was brought a paper to this council which gave a progress report actually on the Development Corporation. And this set out the steps that were being taken to constitutionalise the Development Corporation. Also within there was the funding reserve that we were looking to put forward of £500,000 over 3 years, subject obviously to government funding. And also agreeing that we would have representation at the main board there with the interim vehicle through the leader and the chief executive. So consequently, what this paper is really coming forward is just confirming now that we now wish to move forward. You'll see in the agenda item that you've actually got here a formal letter from the project manager of Development Corporation, formally requesting the first tranche of funding. There's also in there, which sorry is 167k. There's also in there the deliverables in which will be worked on, and so you can see that we're now in full flow, and we're now looking at the delivery of this vehicle going forward. Also, so on the recommendations is going to be the appointment of the leader of the council to be a shareholder on that Development Corporation, and also for the chief executive of Rushcliffe to be on the non-exec board. I think there's going to be 5 non-execs, which are going to be chief executives from the local authorities across that board. So, as I said, this has already been to full council. It's really just confirming those points there with the funding and with the appointments that I've actually set out there. So I'd like to move those recommendations, please, on page 10, section 2, which reflect the items I've just spoken about. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Edivine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to second the recommendation. It is a very important step forward for the prosperity of Rushcliffe, the progress of the Development Corporation. I'd also like to welcome, of course, the announcement of the Freeport bid and its success. And although these are different things, they will go hand in hand. And so I have no hesitation in seconding the recommendation. I'd reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Councillor Gray, please.
The East Midlands Development Corporation, we believe, is vital for the economic health of the region. We need to ensure the economy of the East Midlands as a whole bounces back from the COVID crisis and the effects of Brexit. The corporation will see councils, businesses and universities come together, create jobs, develop new technologies and add value and attractiveness to the region. It's no secret that the East Midlands has been the poor relation in the UK for the last decade. It's consistently seen the lowest levels of public spending on economic growth, transport, including rail, and has the third lowest public expenditure on services, and is actually 10% below the national average in the UK for expenditure per head. Compared to the North West, the East Midlands receives half of the transport expenditure, and compared to London, it's a quarter. The Development Corporation must address these inequalities, and our place on it must just not carve out the best for Rushcliffe, but the best for the region. Our part on the Development Corporation must ensure that the region receives its fair share of public funds, transport investment with low carbon transport networks within, not just through the region. Our economy is suffering from years of neglect by governments that have refused to support industries, businesses and workers. And this wasted potential is holding us all back. Inequalities ballooned as the economy has shifted towards low-paid, insecure jobs. So again, our part in the Development Corporation must ensure that high-quality businesses and industry is attracted to the area to build green technologies and to create an environmentally stable economic base for the whole region. Our region is full of potential, and yet the region has the highest population of young people who are not in education, employment or training in the UK. We also retain fewer graduates from our world-class universities than anywhere else. So again, our part on the Development Corporation needs to ensure that we fight for the provision of high-quality apprenticeships to create skilled workers who are needed for the green technologies, and to make sure that our graduates can find attractive jobs in industries that will matter to them. So to summarise, we agree with the recommendations and look forward to the region working together.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Major, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Given that this has been discussed at length previously, the Liberal Democrats are happy to support this recommendation in order to maintain the momentum for this project. While there remains a level of uncertainty regarding the government's match funding, it's clear that to delay would be of no benefit to anyone and that the sums involved are justified at this stage. It is an exciting time, as we've mentioned, for this part of our borough with the announcement of the East Midlands Airport Freeport in this week's budget. But we do, however, hope that while we're focusing time and money in support of this significant out-of-town development, we won't at the same time be neglecting the importance of revitalising our urban centres, particularly in light of the damage reaped by COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Major. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I will continue our support for putting in the money to look at the further progress to the Development Corporation. Naturally, the Green Group has significant concerns about the proposed Freeport and great concerns about the nuclear fusion technology being pushed as an expression of interest, as the leader said, by the current owners of the Ratcliffe Power Station. That is something that we would certainly not support. However, we do recognise the need to develop the region, to bring jobs to the area, and that the Development Corporation as a whole is looking at 3 sites and not these ones in isolation, and therefore will be continuing to back it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
We have some misgivings about this initiative. It sometimes seems like a lumbering white elephant that could have the rug pulled from under it at any time. Uncertainties include the delay over the incinerator, possible withdrawal of government funding, and possible curtailment of HS2. However, we recognise the potential and support the first year of funding for the interim vehicle. We ask the Chief Executive to ensure that there are review points where we can withdraw if necessary, particularly should there be significant changes to the viability of commercial development at the power station site or some reduction in the role that this Rushcliffe site plays in the overall development. Our ward lies under the main East Midlands Airport flight path, and we regularly receive comments from our residents about the noise. If there is to be an increased number in flights arising from the Freeport and the Development Corporation more generally, measures will need to be needed to limit the impact of noise on residents, and we ask that this consideration be represented at every opportunity. We would also like our representatives to raise at every opportunity the issue of public transport to all these new jobs from all areas of Rushcliffe, and particularly from our ward, which is close by, is providing large numbers of new homes but has no bus service to the airport area. I'm surprised to hear that the expression of interest for the nuclear fusion plant has already been lodged, since it's on the cabinet agenda for Tuesday next week. That is something of a surprise, as the whole issue was to us. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor R. Walker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we've heard tonight, the economic regeneration and development in the regions is clearly on the government's agenda. It remains clear to me that attracting this to the borough can't happen without a vehicle such as the Development Corporation to coordinate it, and therefore I'll be happy to support the recommendations. It's crucial that the directly affected communities are genuinely involved at every level of the decision-making process. And I'm pleased that the leader is committed to creating opportunities for this to happen before the relevant advisory board meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Does anyone else wish to speak? I can't see anyone. Councillor Edivine, you reserve the right to speak.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think there's much I can add to that, other than, thanking the other groups for their support. And I do believe that it's a very significant step forward in helping develop the East Midlands.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand.
Madam Mayor, don't you need to come back to me before we vote?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I do beg your pardon. Sorry. Sorry, Councillor Robinson, right of reply.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just clear up a few misunderstandings here? Councillor Thomas talks about the expression of interest. This is nothing to do with Development Corporation at all, so it shouldn't really be talked about in this agenda item, but I will address it. The STEP project, the expression of interest, as I mentioned, is at the Cabinet meeting next Tuesday. The expression of interest, if it goes forward, has to be lodged by the end of March. So what has been announced is the power station wanting to do the expression of interest, but it does need this council to endorse it. Hence why there's a Cabinet paper there on Tuesday night, but that is nothing to do with the Development Corporation. Just also picking up Councillor Walker, he makes a very good point in terms of communication. I've committed that we are going to hold regular forums before board meetings with all the relevant parish councils to make sure that they have a voice in board meetings as the Development Corporation goes forward. I think that is very, very important. We've also got a member working group, which is cross-party. And again, that is a very important forum in shaping our representation on that board of the Development Corporation. Also, Madam Mayor, just to mention that there are obviously very significant planning issues there as well, and we should never underestimate what they are, because obviously part of that site is in the Greenbelt, and it really so there will be a lot of scrutiny in terms of planning. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I apologise for missing you out. So we will move to a vote now. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then that is carried. So we move on to item 9, which is the Financial Strategy and Budget 2021 to 22. So Councillor Robinson to move, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, once more. 5th of March 2020, I stood before you all and I talked about the very positive outlook for the country and particularly for this authority as I delivered the budget for 2020-21. My optimism was based on the fact we'd actually left the EU, so there was no questions there. We had a majority government, so decisions could be made quickly, and we had a very growing and prosperous economy. Little did I know that 14 days later, we would have been in lockdown. Although I did mention that one of the threats was going to be obviously COVID. But I don't think at that time anybody within this authority realised what would happen over the year and what it would actually do to our economy both nationally, regionally, and of course with the borough, with a real fracturing of all these establishments that we've taken for granted, so to speak. So as I sit now, rather than stand and deliver this budget for your approval, it is a very, very, very different picture. Our income has been decimated. We've actually suffered significant increase in costs in managing the pandemic and in mitigating the impact on our residents and our businesses. We've reflected the huge national pressures in terms of finances, and all these, unfortunately, really have played a very big part as we prepared this budget going forward. But there are three very important principles as I just go forward now and talk about this. And this is a budget about consolidation. It's a budget about ambition, and it's a budget about recovery. In terms of consolidation, we're forecasting that our income receipts are going to drop by 20% and 10% over the next 2 years, respectively, across many of our operations such as car park, leisure, planning fees, etc. We're forecasting that we're going to have a budget deficit of around £1.5 million. This will be financed by reserves, but again, reflecting even as we come out of this recovery period of the pandemic. A transformation strategy is budgeted to deliver nearly £2 million worth of savings up to 2025. So these are the savings across the operations of the business. And unfortunately, you see budgeting there is that we're looking at a pay freeze over the next 2 years for our staff that we've had to budget in there as well. Mitigating the impact of the pandemic. We came into this dreadful crisis with very, very, very good finances and a very, very sound structure, and that has really helped us. We've managed to have a very, very balanced portfolio of investments, for example, which have generated around nearly £2.5 million worth of fees and incomes. And they have been incredibly important, and that is going to allow us actually to increase our reserves from 6.3 million to 7.3 million. The government support has made a huge difference to us, to this authority, in mitigating a lot of the costs in us handling the pandemic internally, as well as nearly £40 million worth of grants from the government that we have managed to get out to our businesses across the borough. I talked earlier about our principles and about ambition and recovery. And no better is it reflected in our ambitions for our capital projects that we still absolutely back and is a major priority to deliver for this authority. And we're looking at over £38 million worth of capital projects as we go forward over the next 5 years. On page 92, you'll see a lot of those capital projects in there. And I'd like to point out to members that capital project isn't about just about building new. It's also about making sure that we look after our own assets. For example, we're looking at a significant investment in the Point, our offices that we own, to make sure that they're kept to the very, very best standards for our occupants. And our community facilities like Gresham playing fields are also going to see substantial repairs and upgrades as we move forward. But as we've talked about very recently, our major capital projects in the building and, the new projects that we're looking at, certainly highlighted by the Bingham Community Hub, £20 million investment that will deliver a fantastic leisure centre, new offices and new community facilities to Bingham and the surrounding villages. Also the crematorium, nearly £10 million that will be started later this year. And again, that will have a significant impact and facilities for all our residents. And in both these projects, I'm delighted that we're investing in real green technologies, where we're going to invest to make sure that the running of those facilities is going to be the absolute very best and save this authority hundreds of thousands of pounds, but also make sure that we are playing our part in a green economy going forward. And of course, these projects are going to create economic growth. They're going to create jobs. Again, absolutely key as we go forward. Madam Mayor, it would be remiss of me as I present this budget not to highlight the risks to members. And of course, COVID is still with us. And as I mentioned, that we are forecasting our revenues to drop, particularly where we're hit very hard is our leisure centres for obvious reasons. We're delighted now that the government has now given us a roadmap, but I think we should all not underestimate how difficult it's going to be to get the confidence back of clients, our customers and our residents right across all our services. There's a risk with the fairer funding, the review by the government that it's doing that we mention very often on how local authorities are going to be funded going forward. Business rates, as the Chancellor mentioned yesterday, that has been pushed back in terms of review. Although the holiday has been extended for businesses, the actual review we're hoping should actually happen later this year, but it just brings back more uncertainty. And of course, council tax as well, as we know, is very controversial, and the uncertainties around it, that will that continue in its present form with the valuations that it's based on. Obviously, as I've just talked about in other items, the Development Corporation, and just to emphasise how important that is to this economy, and the £500,000 that we have ring-fenced to put into that project as we go forward. I mentioned about the investment we've made in technologies, the green technologies that we're very, very proud of, and I'm sure are going to be something which we're going to be really, really keen to talk about and to show other developers that we are leading the way with, for instance, like our development at Abbey Road, the new homes are going in there, and so the technology is going into the crematorium and into the Bingham Hood. We have, to back that up, we have an £800,000 climate reserve in there as well. Madam Mayor, these are unprecedented times, and the outlook looks incredibly challenging for everybody as we go forward. But I commend this budget to this authority. It's robust, it's affordable, it's deliverable, and it's ambitious. And its key is delivering the very, very highest quality first-class services to our residents, to our businesses, and to our communities. It also reflects the commitment, our commitment to the environment and this green recovery that we talk about. This isn't about theory, it's not about futures, this is about the here, the now, and this council delivering through this budget, it's very, very serious environmental commitments. Lastly, Madam Mayor, I would like to thank Peter Linfield and all his team for the incredible work they've done in this most unprecedented times, not just in the business grant side, of course, who've been outstanding, but also in the many, many staff as well that are supporting our finances, that are supporting these services as we go forward. So, Madam Mayor, I would like to move the recommendations on page 19, section 2, A to F of this budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Edivine, please, to second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Were Councillor Moore here, I think he likes to use the term prudent, and we do manage our finances very well, thanks to Peter Linfield and his team. So I would like to second the recommendation that Councillor Robinson has proposed, and I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Councillor Gray, please.
As usual, the budget has been a source of much discussion and debate in the Labour group. I'll start as last year with positives. The council has, as Councillor Robinson has said, weathered the pandemic well and recognises that the full impact is yet to be seen. Capital spend remains bullish, with the Bingham Community Hub and the crematorium project pushing ahead. I've already spoken of our support for the Development Corporation and its importance for the region, and we're pleased that the majority of the Climate Change Action Reserve remains despite the pressure from the COVID pandemic. We do note that the transfer from the Climate Action Reserve should further underline the imperative for the Development Corporation to deliver on its green credentials. We note the purchasing of more environmentally friendly refuse vehicles in line with the council's commitments to meet our environmental standards and improve our air quality in the borough and through all areas in which we operate. We too thank Peter Linfield and the officers of the council, and also for Councillor Moore for taking the time to present the budget at occasions before this session. And the sentiment expressed by Councillor Moore, who's sadly not with us this evening, was to try and avoid ridiculous debates at full council. I pointed out at the time that that is a right that I reserve. Loss of the new homes bonus looms large in this budget and the medium-term financial plan. And while Rushcliffe has borne the brunt of the housing boom in the East Midlands, with one of the fastest growing markets in Europe, the bonus has helped us balance the books. To the untrained eye, many of the strategic housing allocation from the 2014 core strategy are yet to take shape, especially considered alongside sites that were proposed recently when our 5-year housing supply failed. Many of these are already built. Many councils are once again returning to house building to meet that local demand for social housing and to make up shortfalls. The medium-term financial strategy neatly presents that the council no longer receives revenue support grant from central government, representing 3.25 million, which has been mitigated by transformation, which is shorthand for efficiencies, some cuts, and increasing our council tax. We believe that council tax is a regressive and ineffective recurring tax on property that has come to resemble the unpopular poll tax that it replaced. Since it's based on the estimated values of property from April 1st, 1991, it bears little resemblance to the current market values. And the system is designed to ensure that the most expensive properties in Band H, the highest band, no matter what their value, will attract a maximum of 3 times the tax on the cheapest homes. As a result, those living in £100,000 homes pay around 50 times the tax rate of residents living in £10 million mansions as a proportion of the property's value. So although we understand the reasons behind setting this budget, and we commend the great many of the programmes and pieces in it, it's a shame that yet again those who are least able are being asked to give the most, and it's a shame that those who have worked the hardest, as we've discussed this evening, will not see the rewards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Establishing a budget is difficult given the current circumstances. This report and the appendices must have taken a huge effort from a range of staff, given the other pressures of dispersing government grants to businesses and the other problems of the pandemic. So our thanks very much to the staff. The reports describe the situation in complex terms which are not easily understood, but the risks ahead are clear and have already been listed by previous speakers. The Liberal Democrat group will support this item with some reluctance. Reluctance because inequality in society and locally has grown and is more in evidence during the pandemic. And there has been little change to reduce the disparities between the very rich and the very poor, and certainly child poverty. The effect of council tax, limited bans and its irrelevance does create problems, and it does nothing to adequately change the imbalance of resources in the population. Having said that, we are where we are, and that the government's terms are where they are, which is why we will support it. The council applauds itself for setting a comparatively low tax rate. The fact is our number and proportion of high-banded houses is much greater than other councils in Nottinghamshire. And although we're facing the problems that have already been listed, we have also got thousands of new homes being built, which we're stuffed with, which will add to the tax take. So the total tax take in Rushcliffe is higher, so the actual charge level can be lower. Regarding West Bridgford special expenses, they've been pumped up in this budget. West Bridgford Town Centre's cost this year were 55,900. But next year, this budget gives a 63.51% increase to 91,400. Nothing rises by this amount. This loading is created by massively inflating the predicted cost of Christmas lights and hanging baskets, swelling it further by moving the cost of Rushcliffe-wide events, Taste of Rushcliffe and Lark in the Park, from the council's budgets onto the West Bridgford special expenses. I turn to staff salaries on page 96 of the appendix. It's a small point, but it refers to the lowest paid staff, but not the highest. It says the council does not set pay by any multiple because of the dynamic and varied workforce. I agree it should not be set in concrete, but the public should see, the public already see massive rises in company boardroom pay and leaders enriching themselves. So we should be open and transparent about the proportionate difference between the top and the lowest employees. This would guard against cynicism about local authority services, and I think should be stated in future reports. I have some questions on the capital expenditure, which I thought wasn't entirely clear in the report. The capital receipts of 20 million from land at Sharp Hill, land at Abbey Road Depot and land at Hollygate, these are one-offs and not replaced. Is it planned in the future to buy future development land? The council recently bought 2 shiny new office blocks near Wheatcrofts at a cost of 4.5 million, an investment which will bring returns. It just leaves an obvious question which many residents will share. Why is the council investment in out-of-town offices and not in town centres? Why is residents' money being spent on office blocks when the council is still committed, I think, to taking on debt, albeit delayed, to pay for Bingham Leisure Centre and the crematorium? Or is the projected debt still there, or has it changed? We do support the excellent plan for the crematorium and replacement Bingham Leisure Centre, but remain concerned about debt. The report shows a small amount of money from the European Development Fund for the Leisure Centre. Do we know if the Brexit government has established a successor fund that the council can benefit from for such schemes? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, you just made it. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's very clear from this document, and I'm sure from budgets, the length of the country, that the COVID pandemic is going to be writ large in every budget for every council across the entire country. And that's going to be not just this year, but for years to come as well. We have to deal with this, and I think that the officers have done a good job in helping to pull together a budget that will help us as a local authority deal with that. It's an awful lot of paperwork, all online for people watching. We don't have any printed copies. And there's an awful lot to trawl through in that. It is, as Councillor Jones said, a very, very complex document. And I think the officers will be commended for keeping it in a state that is just about understandable. But I think to many lay readers, it would be a very, very difficult and complex document to get through. And I do hope that we can have something that's perhaps a little more readable for everyday folks in the future. There are some very good things in the budget, and there are some concerning things as well. So other councils have outlined some of these. The vehicle replacement programme, which is looking at bringing in electric and hydrogen fuel cell technology to the council's fleet to reduce carbon emissions, improve air quality, is absolutely fantastic. I think that's a really good thing to go for. I'm very pleased to see that the climate change fund is still there at 0.8 million. 200,000 has gone to the Development Corporation. I think that does behove us to say even more that whatever comes in through the Development Corporation has to be a green future, a green technology-led future, and one that actually does not put further pollution on higher carbon emissions at the forefront. We want a clean, green Rushcliffe, not one that becomes a dumping ground for people's waste for an incinerator or use of experimental nuclear power right on our doorstep. And neither of those things would be favourable or well looked upon by our residents, I think. We do have some other things in the budget that can't be avoided. Obviously, the lack of the new homes fund has been mentioned, and we do need to look, I think, perhaps at the amount of money that is being put into the West Bridgford special expenses. Again, as previous councillors have said, there is an increase there, which does seem to be the case where we've had some items that have previously been considered for the benefit of Rushcliffe as a whole, but happen to take place in West Bridgford, are now being put just into the West Bridgford special expenses. And perhaps that's something that we should be pushing back on a bit. I think that there are concerns about that, where you have parish councils looking at their budgets. They have the democratic oversight. We have some democratic oversight of the West Bridgford spend, but that is indirect through the councillors, some of the councillors representing West Bridgford. It's not a perfect system. Perhaps we can look at this in the future in some more detail. But overall, the budget is a sound one, and I've heard what other councillors said about reforming local government taxation. That's a whole other can of worms, and I'm sure it's not one we'll be able to resolve tonight. Yes, it's based on outdated housing values. It needs to be reformed. I would agree with that. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We greatly appreciate the professionalism and the skill of the officers in steering a steady course for our finances in these difficult times, and we do find very much to support in these papers, vast stack of papers as they are. However, West Bridgford residents pay around £50 per annum for their local services and facilities, whereas the other larger settlements in the borough enjoy considerably less in terms of services and local facilities, and on average pay getting on for twice this amount through their parish precept. Speaking personally, I cannot vote for item F of the recommendation, while the residents of West Bridgford continue, however unwittingly, to sponge off the rest of us, and so I will be voting against the recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Can't see any hands. Oh, Councillor Purdue-Horan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to support the motion and echo the comments of my colleagues, and in particular pay tribute to the outstanding efforts of our finance and revenue team, led by Peter Linfield and Sarah Whitaker, who actually, I think, eat and sleep Rushcliffe finances. As chairman of governance scrutiny, we look at the ongoing financial position of council throughout the year on a regular basis, and it never fails to impress me that they are completely on top of this subject and have, on our behalf, and of course the residents of Rushcliffe, have ensured that Rushcliffe Borough Council remains a strong and sustained council. In contrast, we are investing in our communities, and obviously I would say that as we're investing a particularly large project in Bingham, and we're investing in our communities in what has been the most horrendous hurricane of a pandemic affecting all councils and of course the government as well. And not very far away from us, some councils are struggling and they are closing leisure centres and making staff redundant. And I think, you know, it is a tribute to everyone who has worked together, both councillors and members of staff, to ensure that we are running on a financial basis a quality council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I can't see anyone. Councillor Edivine, please, you reserve your right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to pick up on a few of the points that were made, and several expressions of concern were made about the Development Corporation and the green credentials of it. It is a very publicly stated aim of this government to have a green recovery, and the Development Corporation is a well laid out path towards helping to achieve that. So I have no doubt that we will deliver the greener future that we want to see from the Development Corporation. Reference was made to the new homes bonus, and we do know that there will be a replacement for the new homes bonus. We don't know what it is yet, but it'll be announced in a future budget. But there is a replacement for the new homes bonus. And I think it's worth pointing out when talking about new homes that this council, through its granting of planning permission, has seen more affordable housing built in Rushcliffe than anywhere else in Nottinghamshire. And even with the high proportion of housing in total that we have to deliver, our percentage of affordable housing is way above other councils in Nottinghamshire. I think I'd also like to take up the point on transformation, where it is referred to as a byword for cuts. Transformation is actually about making things smarter and doing things better. And this council has demonstrated consistently that we can actually reduce our costs, yet deliver the same level of service. And if only more councils in the country were doing that, then there might not be such a crisis in local government funding that we keep hearing about. And then finally, the West Bridgford special expenses, I sympathise with Councillor Thomas, because the West Bridgford special expenses are lower now than they were in 2016, 2017. So to hear them described as a weighting of expenditure on West Bridgford residents is really not something I recognise, because West Bridgford is the centre of Rushcliffe, and we deliver so many benefits to West Bridgford residents. And yes, of course, other people in Rushcliffe can attend the events there, but they are on the West Bridgford residents' doorsteps. And finally, Councillor Jones referred to the EU funding at the Bingham Leisure Centre. Well, it's the offices that it's actually funding. And I'd only like to point out to him that basically the EU does not raise taxes. So any money that comes from the EU is actually only sent from us in the first place. So they're only giving it back to us. So, Madam Mayor, yeah, I certainly second the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Councillor Robinson, right of reply, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to take up a few points that have been mentioned. First of all, with Councillor Jones about the officers at Walton. He probably fails to remember that this council was actually Commercial Council of the Year a few years ago, which actually reflected how successful this authority has been and recognised nationally for the fantastic and balanced portfolio, which is now paying huge dividends to us, generating millions of pounds worth of revenue, which is then actually supporting frontline services. So the acquisition of those officers were done exactly under that premise. That has been recognised, but you probably forgot to mention that, Councillor Jones, didn't you, with it? In terms of development land, I certainly wouldn't tie this council's hands that it would never buy development land. We don't have any plans at the moment. And as I said at the beginning, is that we are a very ambitious council and we will make the most of any opportunities that actually go forward. But as I say, we're very proud of those capital projects. And thank you, Councillor Purdue-Horan, for reminding members of the state of some councils and the budgets that they are presenting. Perhaps the one over the road, people might want to go to their budget meeting where they're seeing they're closing down community centres in the city of Nottingham in the very poorest areas, because that's the impact of a very, very badly run council with very little budgeting skills, as we've actually seen. Just to correct Councillor Gray as well, you talked about new homes bonus. New homes bonus does not support revenue, it only supports capital, like you said. I think a huge amount of disrespect from Councillor Thomas saying West Bridgford residents are sponging off other residents. I find that incredibly disrespectful, and I hope the members here for West Bridgford perhaps might want to take that up with Councillor Thomas, because I think that is a dreadful thing to say. I really do. West Bridgford expenses, as Councillor Edwin said, are actually less than they were in 2016. In fact, the increase is only 2p more as well from that side. As Councillor Edwin said about EU funding, but the actual question was, is there something to replace it? Yes, there is. As Councillor Edwin said, the principle of EU fund, of course, it was our money anyway that we were spending. It just got a huge chunk taken out of the administration of the EU. Now there is an economic prosperity fund that's been set up by the UK. The government's been put in place, and this council will be benefiting from that at some time in the future. I think I've covered everything. Just the last thing I've actually got on there. Councillor Jones talked about inequality. I think there's very few councils in this country do more than what Rushcliffe does to help improve inequality. In terms of, if you look at the homelessness work that we actually do, as Councillor Edwin talked about, the amount of affordable houses, more than anybody else anywhere in Nottinghamshire. And in terms of the grant funding that we actually do, in terms of how efficient and effective we are. And I will always state, yes, we have got the cheapest council tax in Nottinghamshire and the lowest 25% in this country, which helps all our residents. So with that, Madam Mayor, I would like to say push for these recommendations and take it to the vote, please.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. A recorded vote will be taken for this item, and councillors will be asked to call out their vote when asked to do so by Mrs. Tambini.
I'll now start the roll call. Councillor Adair.
For.
Councillor Bailey.
For.
Councillor Bansal.
Abstain.
Councillor Beardsall.
For.
Councillor Begum.
Sorry, abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Bushman.
For.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cumberlack.
For.
Councillor Cotty.
For.
Councillor Dickman. Councillor Dickman, you're on mute. Councillor Dickman, you're on mute.
Have to move on, Councillor. Mr.
Councillor Dickman. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to hear you, Councillor Dickman.
You can't admit internet is collapsing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Voting for the budget.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Councillor Edivine.
For.
Councillor Gaunt.
Abstain.
Councillor Gowland.
Abstain.
Councillor Gray,
Abstain.
Councillor Healy,
For.
Councillor Howitt,
Abstain.
Councillor Inglis,
For.
Councillor Jones,
For.
Councillor Major,
For.
Councillor Mallender,
For.
Councillor Sue Mallender,
Abstain.
Councillor Mason,
For.
Councillor Murray,
Abstain.
Councillor Phillips,
For.
Councillor Purdue Horan,
For.
Councillor Robinson,
For.
Councillor Shaw,
For.
Councillor Sims,
For.
Councillor John Stockwood,
For.
Councillor Maureen Stockwood,
For.
Councillor Thomas,
Against.
Councillor Upton,
For.
Councillor Verdi,
For.
Councillor Rex Walker,
For.
Councillor Jen Walker,
Abstain.
Councillor Way,
Abstain.
Councillor Gordon Wheeler,
For.
Councillor Jonathan Wheeler,
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Madam Mayor, the vote is carried.
Thank you, Mrs. Tambini. So the vote is carried, and please could councillors mute themselves unless they are about to speak, please, because we have a lot of interference. So we come to item 10, which is the council tax resolution for 2021 to 22. Councillor Robinson to move, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This obviously follows on from the budget report that we have a statutory requirement to actually set the council tax, and I do stress this is a statutory requirement, so I'm not quite sure anybody can abstain from council tax approval if they were thinking of doing it. So while we do share the overall figure is very small of the actual tax take when it comes to council tax, obviously with the police, fire and the adult social care as well. So our share of the overall figure is £147.36, which is an increase of £4.82. Sorry, £4.62. The tax figures are laid out in the report that's detailed in Appendix A, which you'll find on pages 133 to 140. Just to stress again, I know it upsets Councillor Jones that it is the lowest council tax in the county, and we've got also the lowest in the 25% anywhere in this country. We are very proud of it, and I make no apology. Also say this actually being to the budget workshops that everyone was invited to discuss as well. So I'm looking forward to the support of all the members at this meeting. So I'd like to move the recommendations as set out in the paper, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Eddie Bean, please.
Yes, I'd like to second the recommendation and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, please.
Councillor Walker will be speaking on this first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Shall I start, Madam Mayor?
Yes, yes, please, Councillor Walker.
The Conservative manifesto promised to redesign the tax system so that it boosts growth, wages and investment and limits the arbitrary tax advantages for the wealthiest in society. It's a good, albeit very vague, promise that the majority of people can get behind, because we all benefit and value the things that taxation gives us. State-of-the-art treatments at hospital, education for our children, and the roads we drive on, to name the most obvious. However, here we are again, raising an unjust tax that will not boost growth, wages, or investment, and does advantage the wealthiest in society. Property makes up one of the biggest portions of all the UK wealth, and we have a dysfunctional approach to taxing it. Under council tax, people living in the lower value housing pay more in tax as a proportion of the value of their home than people living in multi-million-pound mansions. We need to replace council tax with proportional property tax, as well as making new bans for the most expensive properties. Until these fair and significant changes are made, council tax will remain a tax that advantages the wealthiest in society at a time when coronavirus has made the already giant chasm between rich and poor much worse. This huge divide is made worse by an unjust system of taxation that we cannot condone. So we will continue to vote against a blanket tax increase year on year without reflection and without any effort to reform when the promise was made at the general election. Therefore, we will continue to take this opportunity to ask this administration to lobby their own party and to come true on their manifesto promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Seems to think I'm upset. I'm not upset. I just think Rushcliffe's in a much better position in its council tax arrangements than other councils in the area, simply because we've got more higher banded properties, we're getting more new properties, and many expenses are put off to parish councils and town councils, and including West Bridgford. The sheer fact is that the approach, as I've said earlier on, to council tax does not adequately reflect the disparities of wealth in Rushcliffe or anywhere else. But that is a national system and a national failing, and we are where we are. I just think Rushcliffe's in a very fortunate position and shouldn't crow about others. We will be supporting the council tax reluctantly, but we will because we're in the position that we are set by national government. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, as has been said, council tax is an outdated and imperfect system. It's the one that we're lumbered with at the moment, and therefore I'll be supporting the recommendation. However, it is high time that national government looked into the funding of local government and found a fairer and more equitable way of achieving that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've commented in the past about the smug comments about our relatively low tax rates, only possible because we are a wealthy borough with considerable resources. So I'm with Councillor Jones on those comments. We've got no collective comment on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? Can't see any hands up. In that case, Councillor Edivin, you reserved your right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I hear stories about unfair taxes, and yet this morning I read that the tax take of UK PLC going forward is going to be the highest since the 1960s. And I think it was Dennis Healy, who around about that time, maybe slightly later, decided that he would tax the rich until the pips squeak. And it didn't work out very well for him. So it is, the tax burden across the whole, across the country is going to be high in the future. I think the other comment I'd make is that, again, expenses are not put off to parish councils. Parish councils set their own expenditure and plan their own projects. And so parish councils do not subsidise the borough. And yes, we are a relatively wealthy borough, but it's not without its problems. And we believe that the reason that our finances are so healthy is because we manage them properly. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edivin. Councillor Robinson, right of reply, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just picking up a couple of points have been said, particularly by Councillor Jones and by Councillor Thomas, about being smug because actually people want to live in Rushcliffe. Isn't that an awful thing to say? Because we're building a lot of houses, because actually people want to live in Rushcliffe. And Rushcliffe is prosperous. And the biggest factor on that is because of this council and what it does, its policies and the way it's been run for many, many years. So Councillor Jones, you and I have this battle every year, and I'm never, ever going to apologise for it. We're an absolute victim of our own success. Absolutely. People want to live here. They want to build big houses. We are a prosperous area. So that is why we've got the lowest council tax, and it's something we should be. So if Councillor Thomas thinks that's being smug, then you know what? I'm really happy to be called smug. So I'm very proud of this borough, and I'm very proud of what this council does. I think the Labour Party have really got to have a serious look at themselves to try and understand what this paper is I presented today, because nowhere in there does it say about us actually setting national guidelines on council tax. It is not the purpose of this paper or this authority. So actually what Councillor Walker is saying is that we should actually be illegal. So what we should do, if the Labour are actually running this authority, hopefully it will not happen, they wouldn't actually set a council tax. So actually, they would actually be illegal, absolutely illegal. So what they're saying is, as a councillors, act illegally. What responsibility is that to our residents, to young people? Yeah. And maybe somebody, maybe one of our officers could explain to the Labour Party what the purpose of this paper is. It is actually setting a council tax rate, not actually re-engineering the national tax structure. Yeah. So how long have you been on the council now? I thought by now you've actually got it, but perhaps some re-education is probably needed going forward, and we'll make a note of it. Then hopefully.
Can I just have a point of order, please? This has turned into a rant yet again.
No, I'm just
speak to the motion. I'm afraid this is not is not the purpose of council.
Yeah, we haven't got very long left, Councillor Robinson. So if you could.
Well, I'm responding to the fact that Councillor Walker is going to against this council
address
tax.
the motion, please, Councillor Robinson.
And we have to set a council tax, Madam Mayor. We have to do it legally. That is why we have brought this paper. They are advocating being illegal by not supporting it. That's what I'm actually saying. And also, they've also said about setting national guidelines on council tax. That's all I say, Madam Mayor. Let's take it to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. I will now ask Mrs. Tambini to record the vote of those councillors who have raised their hands.
Councillor Bansal, are you for, against or abstain?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Murray. Councillor Murray, you're on mute.
Against.
Councillor Gowland.
Against.
Councillor Gray.
Against.
Councillor Walker.
Against.
I believe that's everybody.
Oh,
Councillor Gaunt.
yeah, I couldn't. Sorry, I couldn't put my hand up. It wouldn't allow me. I ended up putting a thumb up, and it looked. I didn't really need to do that. I don't know how to do it. It's not letting me do it. But I'd like to obviously vote against, please.
And Councillor Begum.
Against, please.
Thank you. Is that all, everyone?
Looks like it.
The vote is carried, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Tambini. So I declare that vote is carried. So now we come to item 11, which is the electoral review of Rushcliffe. Councillor Robinson to move, please.
Yes, I'm sorry, members, you probably got bored of listening to my voice tonight. This electoral review, so this council participated in a review of its council side. This was requested by the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. And some of the key inputs into this review was the fact that we're projecting 18% growth across the borough. This is between the years of 2020 and 2027. So this will actually increase the number of electors per councillor from 2,058 to 2,509. Now, obviously, that is quite a big increase. Now, two huge areas which will contribute to that population growth, of course, will be Fareham, which is the new site there at Clifton off the A453, and obviously Gamston as well, as that comes online. And between them, they are going to add another 3,500 to 4,000 residents to the actual borough. Just worth mentioning, Madam Mayor, these are the principles in terms of this review. It looks at the context of how the council operates. It looks at the strategic leadership. It looks at accountability, and it looks at community involvement. We have, in terms of the review, there has been consultation with all members and group leaders with this, analysing the reports, and all the information came back. And the recommendation to take forward from this review is that we'll actually increase the number of councillors from 44 to actually 46. That would be the recommendation, and that's what we'd actually submit to the Commission. Well, I need to ask members, they would then look at the actual ward boundaries. That's not the purpose of this report. This is purely about increasing the amount of councillors that we'd actually have on the council. Madam Mayor, we talked a lot about finances tonight, so I think it's important I just mention what the implications of increase of councillors would be. Is that it would be cost us an extra around £11,000 more per annum, plus any expenses for things like training and travelling as well there. So, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move those recommendations that I set out on page 141, section 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Edivine, please, to second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second the recommendation and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Councillor Gray, please.
Thank you. The Labour Group took part in the surveys as mentioned, read responses with interest. You know, we note the substantial growth forecast across the borough, and we believe that 2 additional councillors will help spread the workload and therefore support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Howard, please.
So yeah, the Liberal Democrat Group agree with the points made by the Labour Party. We welcome the proposition to increase the number of councillors. It's a positive step which will help ensure greater representation for residents in wards which are projected to rapidly grow in subsequent years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mallender, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it's not all that long ago that the number of councillors was reduced from 50 odd to the current 44 we have at the moment. I think that it's quite reasonable that, given the increase in number of people in the coming years, that we increase that and ensure that people have the representation they deserve, and therefore increase it to 46 councillors. So I'm happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We would have preferred to see no increase in the overall number of councillors, but we do support the recommendation in the expectation that the extra councillors are to serve the areas of increased population in Gamston and Fareham, and in hope that the next stage of the process will create wards that reflect community barriers and boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I can't see any hands up. I haven't got everyone on the screen. I have got participants up, but I can't see. No. Okay. In that case, Councillor Edivine, you reserved your right to speak.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to all the other comments. Obviously, it clearly was an independent review. We as councillors had a chance to have an input into the review with the commissioners, and I believe that it's actually created the right balance of number of councillors compared with the increase in the population that we're going to see. So that's all I'd like to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Councillor Robinson, your right of reply, please.
Yeah, I should say, Madam Mayor, thank you to the group leaders and to other councillors who participated in this review. I think it was done very fairly, independently, and I think this is a good recommendation going forward. And particularly, I think it's fair for our residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. As there are now no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then that is carried. We're going to have our 5-minute comfort break now. So at least there won't be a queue for the toilets or anything now that you're all in your own homes, presumably. So 5 minutes break. Thank you very much. I know. I hope everyone is back now and ready. So we're moving on to the next item, which is item 12, which is the planning enforcement policy. Councillor Upton to move, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is all about how we enforce planning controls. And I'm very much aware that in some quarters, there is a perception that we are not proactive enough, should be more robust, and if required, take legal action. Be that as it may, this report proposes a significant improvement in the powers for the council to enforce planning controls. It may not be perfect. It may not go as far as some people would like. But this is a complicated area, and we have to be, I suggest, realistic. The challenge is to strike the right balance between being proactive on the one hand and reactive on the other. The amount of staff resources available, the cost, the financial cost of the enforcement, and getting more public confidence in the system. Currently, we have a code of practice which ends this month. So this report is very timely. A code of practice is very different to a policy. And given the history of concerns expressed about enforcement by some members of the public, councillors and officers, albeit in my opinion, these concerns are a small proportion of the total number of planning consents made, planning controls made. A draft policy was produced by our Growth and Development Scrutiny Group and approved by the Cabinet for public consultation. This consultation resulted in several changes to the draft policy, and I accept that not all the suggestions have been incorporated for various reasons, and these are set out in Appendix 2 of the report. Nevertheless, a policy has far more weight, as I say, than a code of practice, and a copy of the new policy is appended to this report as Appendix 1. Now, there are other more detailed issues around the enforcement of planning controls in conservation areas, and I am minded of these, and these will be discussed by the Growth and Development Scrutiny Group soon. I believe this new planning enforcement policy significantly increases our powers to ensure that planning controls are complied with, and it should give the public greater confidence that we take this issue seriously. I'd like to make the recommendations at item 2 of the report, namely the council adopts the planning enforcement policy, and B, delegates to the executive manager communities authority to make minor changes, updates to the policy as required. And I think I'll stop there and just reserve the right to speak. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. You're the mover of the motion, so you'll have a right of reply. So Councillor Inglis to second, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we really need to protect our natural build and historic environments, and that can only be done through having this robust enforcement of planning control. Having such a policy in place can only be more effective than the code of practice, has been mentioned, but it's going to provide a clear direction and accountability that can be measured. We do owe it to our public to give confidence and assurance that reported breaches are investigated and they are ultimately achieving appropriate and timely resolutions. Yes, it would be ideal to have unlimited staff, but we are constrained by staffing and budgets. So investigations may need to be more selective but realistic. It's important that this policy is implemented to ensure we have the greatest efficiency possible. And as it's been said, to give us some teeth. Educating and encouraging developers at an early stage will help allow time for the more serious breaches to be investigated and progress to the full. I mean, I feel if there is a history of firm proactive policing, it's going to set a strong precedence. And I respect and respect for Rushcliffe, for the developers who may wish to push the boundaries. Sorry for that pun. I have no hesitation to second that the planning enforcement policy is adopted, and also endorse the recommendation to allow the executive manager the delegated authority to make the minor adjustments as required. And I also reserve the right to speak.
I'm sorry, you have just spoken, so you can't really reserve your right to speak when you've already spoken.
Sorry.
So you've made your speech.
Okay.
Yeah. Councillor Upton will have an opportunity to has right of reply. So Councillor Gray, please.
Councillor Gowland will be giving our response on this, please.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland.
Thanks very much. I think I know what the residents of Bridgewood Road would say to this. Bridgewood Road, where the beautiful house was demolished last year, they'd say too little, too late. I've seen in my ward the enormous stress and grief caused to neighbours by people not following approved plans. I've also seen how the council can respond really quickly to stop damage being inflicted on a tree. As the policy states, the integrity of the planning service depends on the council's readiness to take enforcement action where appropriate. It also depends on residents, both developers and neighbours, knowing of the council's readiness to take enforcement action when appropriate. The best way to avoid breaches occurring in the first place is to ensure that everybody knows that the council will act to maintain the integrity of its planning decisions. This policy focuses too much on the fact that enforcement is discretionary. It would have been sufficient to state it, it is clearly discretionary to some extent, and just outline the possible routes to resolution of the case. By focusing on it too much, it's diluting the policy. Fundamentally, it is rather a case of shutting the stable door after the horse is bolted. Nonetheless, it's a great step forward, and we're supporting this motion, and we'll be advertising it to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Major, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Oh, can you hear me all right? Sorry,
Yes.
I'm going big. I do find it astonishing that planning enforcement, which is something that touches so many people on a daily basis, is not a statutory obligation for any council. But that aside, we're pleased to see that Rushcliffe Borough Council do feel that it is necessary to deliver an effective enforcement service. And so the Liberal Democrat group welcome this new and improved articulation of our approach. We thank the officers and those who participated in the consultation for their work in putting this together. We are aware of the limitations in terms of the resourcing in this area and have no doubt that the officers will have a very full plate dealing with things that are coming in. It would always be better to have more money and more people on the ground, but we appreciate that this isn't possible in all circumstances. However, I hope the policy will provide clarity and confidence to borough residents in reporting these matters, whilst also giving our enforcement officers the backup they need to ensure that planning violations are dealt with appropriately. We therefore support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Major. Councillor Mallender, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, very pleased to see this come forward finally. I think, and just not just speaking for myself, but many other councillors here this evening and previous councillors on this this authority have had lots of people coming forward saying this is inappropriate development. Some developer is pushing the boundaries here, trying to squeeze an extra flat into a development without telling anyone, putting in an entire extra floor of a building without telling anyone. Basically, with our local residents saying, but Rushcliffe was seen as a soft touch. Developers think they can get away with anything. And I think it's high time that we have, it's been well overdue actually, that we had something like this policy put forward. I'm very pleased to see it here. Yes, it can be strengthened, it can be improved, and we all are very, very aware of the need to have people on the ground actually doing the enforcement and the difficulties with the costs of that as well. But it does need to be done. We do need to make it very clear to our residents that when people put forward planning applications, if developers try and flout the proposals, if they sort of try and shoehorn extra bits in, if they cut corners, then the enforcement is there, and that Rushcliffe is backing that up. As I say, it's well overdue, but I'm very pleased to see this finally come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullender. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm disappointed that not all ward member responses were considered and included in the consultation summary. We welcome the proposed improved structuring of the document. As this will be a living document, we would like to see adjustment to the wording to allow proactive monitoring where necessary of housing sites smaller than the threshold of 50 homes. We would like to see improvements to the tone, which is somewhat off-putting and emphasises what we can't or won't do over what we can and will do. However, this is a step forward, and speaking personally, I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'm pleased and encouraged to hear the comments that we've heard so far. It is time that we had this policy in place, because as we all know, planning is a big issue in this borough. And we heard earlier on that people want to move to the borough, and quite rightly so, because it's a good place to live. But it's absolutely crucial and critical to us all and to our residents that the permissions that builders and other developers get are adhered to. And we've all heard and seen incidents of breaches of permissions, or indeed activity taking place where permission hasn't been granted. So to have this policy in place is going to be very, very helpful. I suppose whatever policy you come up with, you will always find areas for improvement, and you know, could we tweak it? Should we say that? Should we do that? But of course, like all policies, it's they can, once you've got a policy in place, they can always be looked at in the future. But yes, I'm very pleased to see this, and I think it will help us as a council and as people who often are pointed at for granting permission for this and that or the other, to ensure that the permissions in place are followed, and also get the message across to developers large and small that we are serious about looking carefully at what is being done. So yeah, good to see this, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam. Yeah, planning enforcement is always a very emotional subject, isn't it? Especially if you feel as though you are the aggrieved party. So the residents are relied on very much by officers, because officers can't be expected to be in every place all the time. Utopia, if we maybe tripled the council tax, then maybe we could have a planning enforcement officer permanently based on every planning or development site as it's built, and to check up on where every brick goes, etc. But unfortunately, utopia doesn't exist at the moment. And so it's always a balance. And that balance includes residents being there to report things. If they find that there's something that's wanting, the officers can then check it out. So it's that balance of resources, balancing the number of officers that can be available in order to carry out the function. There's always going to be room for improvement, as Councillor Butler said. I hope I'm not tying the leader's hands too much when I say that if need be, we can always look at this again in a year or two's time, if it becomes appropriate so to do. I'm very pleased that all members on the scrutiny group voted in favour of this to go forward to the Cabinet, and I'm sure that things will improve, and let's hope that we can have a sensible way of enforcing planning. As I say, there's always going to be some emotion in it, but let's hope that the emotion is reduced by an improved policy. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Upton to have right of reply, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just picking up on a couple of points that members have made. I think many of us are aware of the demolition of the house on Bridgeford Road. I would say to that, well, this is why we need a policy rather than a code of practice. it gives us more teeth to deal with issues such as that in the future. The point made about it being discretionary, yes, it is a discretionary power that central government gives to councils. As far as I'm aware, we've never exercised that power. We've always gone for a code of practice, and now we're going for a policy. The other point about we should be more proactive in monitoring the smaller sites, I agree, and I think we do, but it's all down to, as I say, a balance of resources, staff-wise, financially, and the rest. And we do rely on the public to make their concerns known to us. To conclude briefly then, I would say that planning enforcement is a rather complex and clearly an emotive subject area to many people. But as I say, I believe a policy is far better than the code of practice. And this council, as people have said this evening, will take a significant step forward if we approve this policy. That said, I'm sure it won't be sufficient for everybody, but we have to be pragmatic and proportionate and realistic in what we can actually reasonably do with our resources. I really wouldn't want to raise expectations which we can't deliver on. Therefore, I think to some degree we do rely on the public to raise their concerns with us. And I take the point about trying to promote this policy and communicate it as wide as we can to the general public and everybody else in our borough. So finally, I ask that members vote for the recommendations that I outlined previously. I can say them again if you would wish me to, but that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand. I can't see any hands, so as there are now no raised hands indicating a desire to object or abstain, then that is carried. So now we come to item 13, notices of motion. To receive notices of motion submitted under standing order number 12. So the first one is to be put to council by Councillor Jen Walker. So could you move the motion, please, Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Community wealth building is a people-centred approach to local economic development. It reorganises local economies to be fairer. It stops wealth flowing out of our communities, towns and cities. Instead, it places control of the wealth into the hands of local people, communities, businesses and organisations. Community wealth building is a response to the contemporary challenges of austerity, financialisation, and provides resilience where there's risk and local economic security where there's precarity. As a purchaser of goods and services within the public sector, we must appreciate how our spending choices impact our local economies, people, and jobs. Post-Brexit UK may mean that we no longer be subject to European procurement law. As such, we need to take back control of this vital element of our national economy and develop a national procurement framework. This will support competitiveness and business development, but also advance national and local suppliers within the public sector supply chain. This framework should also embed a wider societal view as an intrinsic feature of all suppliers to the public sector. The term anchor institutions is used to refer to organizations which, one, have an important presence in a place, and two, are tied to a particular place by their mission, histories, physical assets, and local relationships. Some examples of anchor institutions in Rushcliffe are our Borough Council, our County Council building, Trent Bridge Cricket Ground, Nottingham Forest Football Club, our leisure centres, large academy chains, and even Radcliffe-on-Soar Power Station. We're not talking about legislation or social good tick boxing, but rather we want to encourage businesses to go beyond the provision of jobs and wealth, as many businesses play a social role. This role should be celebrated and developed. This is about growing a new economic version of traditional corporate social responsibility, moving towards ingrained behavioral change, where the social benefit of businesses are not perceived as an add-on, but about intrinsic, deep, and caring business attitudes to wider society. We need new incentives to encourage new forms of business citizenship, including progressive behaviors to reduction in local business rates. We also need new criteria, which include weighting towards national investment for wider social return and value, including environmental, well-being, local employment, and community development outcomes. So we call upon this council to investigate community wealth building as a means of ensuring that money is kept circulating in our local economies. 2, to support our local economy and businesses, particular SMEs, accepting procurement law, and to engage with other anchor institutions in Rushcliffe to encourage them to procure locally wherever possible. And 3, to investigate the possibility of establishing community land trusts or working through public commons partnerships as a means of transforming the ownership of many underutilized public assets by transferring decision-making to citizens through common ownership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Gaunt, I believe you're seconding the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The UK is the 6th most unequal country in the world, according to the OECD. Financial wealth is held by a small minority. 44% of the UK's wealth is owned by just 10% of the population, 5 times the total wealth that's held by the poorest half. More than a fifth of the population live on incomes below the poverty line, despite the fact that the majority of these households are in work. At the local level, this means that the wealth generated by workers, local people, communities, local enterprises and businesses in our towns and cities does not flow back to them, but instead is extracted by distant shareholders as profit dividends. Data from the OECD in 2017 identified that the UK was the only developed economy where wages have fallen in real terms while the economy grew. Over the last 30 years, we've seen the severing of the links between wages and economic growth, which has fueled further this inequality and led to the hollowing out of local economies. There is a solution. Rebuilding the connection between the people and the places that create wealth and those who benefit from it is at the heart of community wealth building. We know that locally owned or socially minded enterprises are more likely to employ, buy and invest locally. This means that rather than extracting wealth, they contribute to local economic development. Community wealth building seeks to promote locally owned and socially minded enterprises. To further strengthen the link, community wealth building promotes various models of enterprise ownership. These include public sector insourcing, municipal enterprises, worker ownership, cooperatives, community ownership and local private ownership. These models enable wealth created by users, workers and local communities to be held by them rather than flowing out as profits to shareholders. Secondly, cost is often the dominant determining factor in who gets the contracts with major anchor institutions. Environmental credentials, social value and decent employment conditions tend to be a weak consideration. Again, there is a solution. Community wealth building promotes the progressive procurement of goods and services, as this spending power can be a means through which greater economic, social and environmental benefits can be achieved. This procurement process can create dense local supply chains and ecosystems of local enterprises, SMEs, employee-owned businesses, social enterprises, cooperatives and other forms of community ownership. This is important because these types of businesses are more likely to support local employment and have a greater tendency to recirculate wealth and surplus locally. Finally, how land and property assets are owned and managed are key features of any local economy. Land ownership matters because it's an expression of economic political power. And in the UK, the ownership of land is concentrated in the hands of the very few, while the least wealthy 30% have no net property wealth at all. The current state of land ownership is a major driver of inequality, as a few private owners benefit from speculation on property markets, while the majority suffer the consequences of unaffordable houses prices. A huge amount of wealth is held through the land and property assets of anchor institutions. However, in recent decades, over 2 million hectares of public land has been sold off to private interests, often with little scrutiny or accountability. These trends have been exacerbated by conditions of austerity, with local authorities like Rushcliffe put under pressure to sell off land and property assets rather than investing in social, economic and environmental value for the local community. Through a community wealth building approach, these assets are owned and managed in ways that ensure that they generate wealth for local citizens rather than enclosed by private interests. The goal here is not simply for a local authority or anchor institution to own more land, but instead to ensure that the land they do own is run by and for the people. This can be understood through the concept of the commons, the idea that the land held by public institutions is owned by all of us together. To achieve this, public landowners should develop governance and management structures where communities can take direct control of common assets, for example, through transferring underutilised assets to community land trusts or working with public commons partnerships. The local state should engage citizens groups to get involved in the governance and management of municipal assets at every level. By advancing a commons approach to public land and assets, anchors can ensure that our shared buildings, parks and other land holdings help to create good local economies, ensure sensible environmental stewardship and advance social justice. As a borough, we could lead the way in increasing the wealth and prosperity of our residents in a more sustainable way, which benefits all the residents of Rushcliffe rather than shareholders and investors who live in London and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gaunt. Councillor Edivine, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not many people would not support the principle of ensuring that wealth is kept within a community through local actions. And this council cares deeply for our residents, and our aim has always been to ensure that our actions are for residents' benefits. We already do many things to ensure that we support the local economy. We've established Carbon Clever Big Business Club, where larger companies can help smaller companies to decrease their carbon footprint, is one example. We regularly run seminars for local SMEs to enhance their chances of securing business from the public sector. As a former owner of an SME, I have to say that whilst we were in the EU, the balance of procurement was always in favour of big business. You should ask yourselves, and I was in the food industry, why so many public bodies buy catering supplies from the likes of Brakes and Bidfest, rather than the local butchers and greengrocers. It's absolutely key that we should open up the supply chains to our local suppliers. But now that we're outside of the straitjacket of the EU and their diktats on procurement, we should be able to move this forward and actually make sure that we can get local suppliers supplying local businesses and institutions. When we built the arena, we were unable to implement a policy of localism, and I'm pleased to say that Bingham is going to be very different. We will be using a local company, we'll be creating local jobs, and there is a clear policy of this company to source local supplies wherever possible in their plans. As you know, we regularly review our underutilised assets, and I find it quite ironic that when we wanted to review Electoral Hall, there was a furore created by the Labour Party and misrepresented what we were trying to do. But nevertheless, we will soon have a community-based group running this facility for the betterment of the wider community. So yes, we agree with the principle of community wealth building, but we do not support this motion, which in our opinion will only serve to increase bureaucracy and cost and increase extra time for officers when we already deliver so much to our residents. And we would rather focus on what we actually already deliver. So, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we looked at this motion, we thought it was rather wordy, but the spirit of the recommendations, the three recommendations, we very much support. In particular, the second one about encouraging local procurement, as Councillor Edivine has said that we already try to do, but it does seem like it's worth it as a principle of the council's operations. And we do know that community land trusts are spreading across the UK. There's a large number of local groups running community land trusts, both to provide social housing, but also to provide other facilities in their area. And I don't know whether it's for the council to investigate it, but I think it is something that should be promoted and understood. And in a way, it is a pity that that model wasn't used for Luttrell Hall, and it's interesting it's come up now, slightly late. But I'm sure there must be other facilities particularly in the villages with pubs and the like closing, where community land trusts might have some say. With some hesitation about the first recommendation, we'll be supporting the 3 recommendations. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, there's some interesting ideas in this. I think it's worth the council investigating. It does say we call upon this council to investigate community wealth building. Well, that's, let's investigate it. Let's have a look. If everyone's agreed that it's a good idea that we increase the wealth and the well-being of our communities and make sure that they are healthy and have an environmentally friendly future and a sustainable future, then this is one option. Let's have a look at it. Supporting the local economy. A lot of this reminds me very much of the Localism Act and the localism bills which came forward and which were discussed at this council in previous years, which, there was some scepticism at first, but eventually that became something that was accepted locally and nationally as well. I think we should support this motion and take it forward and see how we can better the lives of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. Councillor Thomas, please. You're right, Councillor Thomas.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. I found it now. There does seem to be much worth investigating here. It's not something that we have a lot of knowledge of or have formed a strong opinion on. But I think it's definitely something that is worth taking to scrutiny, perhaps, for further investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Robinson, you wish to speak.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that. Just to emphasise what Councillor Edovin said, that we actually do this right now. This is what the council does and has been doing for many years. And it was interesting. I think it was Councillor Mallon talking about land, or Councillor Jones, that there are numerous parcels of land that community groups now run, like the Wildlife Trust, the Skylarks near Lady Bay, and these. So we've talked about Luttrell Hall. We're talking about the crematorium in terms of the building of that and the procurement, which is going to be local, and local jobs is a major part of us awarding those contracts. The principles now are actually embedded in this council from the top to the bottom, and you have my absolute assurances on that. I totally agree with what Councillor Gordon and Walker have put out here. And the principles are absolutely right. I totally agree, but we don't need to package it, spend money and valuable officer time to do investigations. The thing is working. Yeah, it needs to be improved. And I can absolutely guarantee the Cabinet is absolutely committed to make sure that this council stays on tune and we absolutely deliver the investment in our communities and making sure that wealth stays in there. Sorry, this is the other example. You talked about our football, our sports clubs. You mentioned, didn't you, with his anchor about Forest and Trent Bridge. Two great examples. They do all that. They've got lovely, fantastic community facilities that they do. They own the Young Project for us. Forest do so much in the community. It's all happening around you now. You don't need to package it, spend a load of money, which in terms of investigation, because it's officer time, when it's actually being done right now. So in summary, I totally agree with your principles, but we don't support the motion because it's really simple. We do it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Brennan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, well, Councillor Robinson's really said quite a lot of what I was going to say. I think at one moment there, Councillor Gaunt, I thought I was back at university. I felt like I thought you were going to get Mao's little red book out for me for a moment. It took me way back. I think there's a lot of good stuff in here as well. looking at innovative and creative ways to improve local economies through things like the community wealth initiatives have a lot of good stuff in them. However, I think the point's been made when you drill down into a lot of what it's about, we're already doing quite a lot of it. And I've spent over a quarter of a century looking at and working on public sector local economic development initiatives, which is essentially what this is. And these initiatives come around and they're called different things and they have some new bells and whistles on them. And essentially a lot of it is the same stuff. I mean, I looked at the Centre for Local Economic Strategies work, which talks quite a lot about this community wealth building. And I know they've done quite a lot of work in Manchester. I think they've been doing it since around 2009. And they're still doing it 12 years later. And Manchester still scores persistently high on a whole range of indices of poverty and local deprivation. So does the model work? I don't know. Is it effective? I'm not saying it's not, I'm just asking the question. Most of the areas that have tried these small-scale local initiatives are the areas that have suffered from post-war deindustrialisation, and they still continue to be stubbornly resistant to improvements, and that's what the government's levelling up agenda, as announced in the budget and funded in the budget yesterday, is seeking to address. That's not to say I don't think public sector-led economic development initiatives do play a part. I mean, we need a business-friendly fiscal environment, as long with the sort of massive investments and incentives for business that were announced in the budget yesterday, and they will do a lot to keep wealth in local areas. And as the point's been made, leaving the EU's procurement constraints mean that we can be much more creative and effective in terms of trying to engage local businesses with our public procurement schemes. And I think all of us support the idea of doing that and exploring how we could do that further. But I don't think that we need to tie it up in a new initiative. I don't think we need to distract officers at a time when we need to be working very closely with our local businesses to get grants to them, to get them to survive, that we want to be dressing up these initiatives in a new sort of all singing, all dancing concept that we're trying to sell out in the community. So basically, I mean, this motion talks in the preamble about trying to find new and innovative ways for sustainable economics going forward, and we can't go back to the way we were, and I think most people would probably agree with that. I just don't think now's the time to rebrand a lot of the work that we're already doing on the ground, as Councillor Robinson and Councillor Zedabine have already said. I don't think the time is now to distract ourselves from that. Essentially, I think there's some good stuff in here, but for me, it was a very wordy motion. There's a lot there that I would struggle to support, and I don't think now's the time to be experimenting with these new initiatives or rebranding old initiatives when we really need to be getting money to the front line and supporting our local businesses. So for that reason, despite the fact that I know there are some good ideas behind some of this, I won't be supporting the motion tonight either. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Can't see any other hands up. Could Councillor Jen Walker please respond to the debate?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd really like to give everyone a big thanks who's supported it. It's really nice to see some open-minded kind of attitudes towards how we could do things a bit differently, because despite what was said about the timing, I personally feel that the timing couldn't be better, that this is the time when we need to make those changes. Saying that we don't, now's not the right time is just madness. Business need our help more than ever, and we need to be showing kind of how things can be done. We need to show our support for local businesses. We need to show our support for people who are struggling right now, not leaving it for a couple of years down the road. And I think there's some missed opportunity here, obviously. It's going to be voted down, which is just a shame. It's a shame. It's a missed opportunity. And I do feel that it is being missed because it's on that party political line. And I really actually kind of was hopeful with this motion that it was something that would unite us all, because it is about keeping the wealth that is created in our community and ensuring it stays in our community. It really is that simple. And it's not about rebranding. It's not about kind of new and flashing bells on it. It couldn't be more simple. It's a very, very simple. And I know we are doing that in ways, but some of the institutions that Councillor Robertson mentioned were charities. And it's not really about just kind of, that was what I was trying to get away from, not just the good work that the football clubs do. You know, it's not just that, and it's not just about that, although that's wonderful. We're trying to kind of make it part of the business in a way that's deeper. And I was really kind of looking forward to get my teeth stuck in with that. Not necessarily with officers either, with other councillors as a cross-party kind of idea. So it's a bit of a shame that they can't bring themselves to work with us on this. But yeah, if the rest of you are interested, please go and check it out. Maybe we can bring it back to the table at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Since the majority group have expressed the view that they are not going to support this motion, we're going to do, for time constriction, we're going to do it the other way round. So depending on the sense of the debate, are there any councillors wishing to support or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to support or abstain by raising your electronic hand. So could Mrs. Tambini go through those councillors, please, who have raised their hands?
Councillor Cumberlack, are you for or abstaining? Councillor Cumberlack, you're on mute.
I'm abstaining.
Thank you. Councillor Gowland.
Supporting.
Councillor Major.
Supporting.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Murray, you're on mute.
You then, isn't it? Does it sound good?
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Shaw.
For.
Councillor Way.
Abstain.
Councillor Jem Walker.
For.
Councillor Richard Mallender.
For.
Councillor David Sims.
Abstain.
Councillor Bansal.
For.
Thank you, councillors. Madam Mayor, I think that's all of the councillors.
No.
Oh, apologies, Councillor Gaunt. I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand. Councillor Gaunt.
For.
And Councillor Begum.
Oh, and Councillor Begum.
Yeah, for.
Thank you.
Is that everyone?
I think that's everyone.
Okay. So the motion is lost. So now we have the second notice of motion to be put to council by Councillor Gowland and seconded by Councillor Gray. So Councillor Gowland, please.
Thank you. So I'm asking the council to support the Climate Change and Ecology Emergency Bill, which will require the UK to enact a serious plan to deal with our fair share of emissions so the planet doesn't exceed its critical rises in temperature. Ensure we take account of our entire carbon footprint in the UK and overseas. Protect and conserve nature here and overseas along our supply chains. Not depend upon technology to save the day, which is quite relevant here tonight. And to ensure that ordinary people have a real say in the way forward in making these things happen. We all know we have a problem, and one of the best things about being elected to this council was to discover that everybody, pretty much everybody in Rushcliffe knows that and understands that. We see the biblical rainfall, we see the changes in seasons. We all agree on this council this isn't right. But I don't think we can say the central government take it quite as seriously as we are here. Look what's happened to fuel duty in the last 24 hours compared to what's happened to train fares here. And this isn't all about CO2, it's about the whole environment. It's not just about, the whole environment isn't just about protecting plants and animals, it's protecting you and me and our young people who've given so much this year. We need to look after the planet for them. I want to give just two examples of things that are really, beyond belief really what's going on. If you look at placentas of newborn babies, they have microplastics in them. We're not talking about microplastics on top of Everest or microplastics in the Antarctic. They're in the placentas of newborn babies. Sticking with newborn babies whose mothers are exposed to air pollution, those babies have changes to their cells which are effectively equivalent to those cells aging. It's complicated, but it's effectively equivalent to those cells being prematurely aged when the babies are born because the babies are exposed to air pollution. We can't carry on like this. But it's not a council of despair. There are things we can do. Focusing on CO2, today we've talked about fusion power. This is an exciting initiative for our city, I don't deny that, and it probably does have a small part to play in providing a diverse, secure energy mix in the future, but it isn't without negative environmental consequences, and I'm not entirely sure an endless supply of energy would be good for the environment in its broadest sense. But most importantly, it's not providing solutions now in the medium term when we need them to solve the climate emergency now, not in 50 years' time, or even 20, 30 years' time. Wind power is making a significant contribution. We know how hydrogen can transform the economy, and we in Rushcliffe could lead the way on hydrogen. There are lots of things we can do. And it's not just about these sort of big scale things, it's about changing behaviour. But we don't all have to do everything, not everything's bad. Insulating houses, I strongly support insulating houses. I often can be seen wearing my hat because it's very cold in mine. Being able to travel on the bus has transformed my life in recent years, realising I can read every day. So there's lots of things that are positive that can come out of this. As Councillor Robinson said earlier, becoming green will save us money. So it's not about what I want to do with my life, it's what the whole of Rushcliffe wants to do and how we can make decisions that suit our local community and our local geography. So I would like to set up citizens' assemblies in Rushcliffe. We have the social capital in Rushcliffe to do this and to lead the way on it. And I'm not suggesting one big citizens' assembly to look at the whole problem, but focused little citizens' assemblies on housing or transport and waste management, food production, that can look at how we can tackle this in the round in Rushcliffe. So I call upon the council to support the Climate and Ecology Emergency Bill, to set up a citizens' assembly to develop an emergency strategy for Rushcliffe as set out in the bill, to publish its decision and to write to local MPs to ask them to support the bill and to write to the organisers of the campaign expressing our support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Councillor Gray to second the motion, please.
I second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Gowland. I mean, we can hear the passion in your voice, and we all share, I think everybody on this council understands and shares your view of how critically important these issues are. I don't think anybody would disagree with you. Climate change, ecological degradation of the national environment, nationally and globally, are of profound concern to all of us, I'm sure, and I can clearly hear in your voice how strongly you feel about it, and I share it, and many of us here do. However, the government has already taken action to address this by setting a target to reach net zero emissions, and it's the first of the major economies to do so. The case for tackling biodiversity loss, climate change, and the environmental risks to public health, which you clearly pointed out and illustrated very effectively, is clear, and we believe it's reflected in the government's Environment Bill, which is currently working its way through Parliament. And we believe that that Environment Bill will deliver on the government's manifesto commitment to deliver the most ambitious environmental programme of any country and any leading economy. I agree investment is needed now, but I believe it's in science and innovation, in new greener technologies, in transport, aviation, construction, energy, all of those areas. We need scientific and innovative responses and solutions to those things, and more widely in the economy, to ensure that it's globally that living standards are raised, not just locally or within the United Kingdom. And at the same time, we do need to protect our precious natural resources and repair the damage that's already done. I don't think anybody would disagree. Locally, this council is playing its part. We've got a strong record of performance in these areas. As you know, we in 2019 declared our own climate emergency, and we made a commitment that our own operations would be carbon neutral by 2030. These are not small things, I'm sure you would agree. And just a couple of weeks ago, the Cabinet agreed a wide-ranging, comprehensive, partnership-based nature conservation strategy, which emphasises those things you raised: biodiversity, species and habitat protection, the importance of trees, wetlands, grasslands to the health and well-being of the borough and all our residents. Our significant capital investment programme, which has been talked about in several subject areas today, such as the Bingham Leisure Centre and the crematorium, schemes such as the Abbey Road Housing Project, are all using market-leading green energy technology. I think we can be proud of our record on these things. We can't do it alone. We're a strong partner in the Midlands Energy Hub, working under the direction of the D2N2 LEP energy strategy. And as you know, and as we've discussed this evening, we're working with partners to secure investments in the Radcliffe-on-Soar power station site that would be world leading in innovative green energy research and solutions. Our own carbon management action plan is due to be scrutinised by our communities group in April, and that demonstrates our strong commitment to wide engagement and transparent progress, transparent reporting on our progress. And I hear what you're saying passionately about citizens panels, but I think, you know, that's what we're here for, isn't it, as elected members, to talk to our residents, to garner their views and to represent those back to the council and to government. We recognise it doesn't respect local authority boundaries, this agenda. It requires collaboration with public and private sectors in order to deliver results, no doubt about that, and engagement with our citizens through ourselves, the councils, parish councils and local business groups is going to be really important. I understand that the private members bill referred to in this motion has not yet got a second reading scheduled. I'm aware as well that there is a coordinated national campaign from the Green Party, from some Labour politicians, although I'm not sure how much the front bench is supporting it, and groups such as Extinction Rebellion and Greenpeace, a coordinated campaign to lobby MPs across media, social media and so on to try to secure a second reading for the bill running over the next few weeks. And that's fair enough. I mean, you know, everybody feels passionately about this, campaign for it. But for us, I think the government's ambitious environment bill that's currently working its way through Parliament is part of that answer. And given that the UK will be chairing the COP 2021 climate change conference in Glasgow later this year, I don't think this is the right time to bring this motion. It's not timely or helpful right now to be looking at this private members bill. The government's already responding to these challenges. We want to focus our energies on helping them deliver the environment bill and the successful COP conference. And for those reasons, we'll not be supporting the motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Clearly, this council is doing a great deal, as Councillor Brennan has listed. And I don't think this motion is creating any criticism of local action by the council. To me, what's most exciting about this motion is the proposal of Citizens' Assembly, because we know that one of the dynamics which leads to delay in action is that ordinary people, way beyond councillors' reach, think, well, it's somebody else's task to do something at some future point. And the notion of citizens' assemblies engages such a wider number of people in thinking. And personally, I think the question is, what can we all do? Not necessarily what government can do, but also both. And I think the proposal for Citizens' Assembly is to be really, really worthwhile in shifting the perspectives of many people in terms of the timescale of action that is needed. So I will be supporting this motion for that reason, not so much the other reasons. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'll be supporting this motion. It's quite right. It is something that's being put forward by Greens inside and outside of various parliamentary bodies, as well as I think there's 98 MPs currently supporting the bill at the moment. There is a vast amount that needs to be done. The current Climate Act is out of date, does need to be strengthened, and especially, you know, as the UK is hosting the Climate Change Summit this year. We have got inconsistencies in the current national policy that need to be addressed. Maybe some of the government's own bill will address some of that, but we have concerns that it won't be far-reaching enough to achieve the carbon reductions that are going to be needed over the over the next few years to reduce and mitigate the climate emergency. The idea of citizens' assemblies has been used in other countries as well. They help garner greater public support and understanding and outreach of the challenge that is actually there. I still meet people who think that because Rushcliffe or because other councils have declared a climate emergency, that's it. That's fine. It's all sorted. The council's going to sort it out. End of. And that is a real misunderstanding that, you know, that we all have to challenge and say, no, this is not just about your council. This is not just about your parliament. This is a worldwide issue, and this is something that we can address on all levels, from our own individual behaviour right up to transnational organisations. And it's fantastic that we passed the climate emergency and have had a budget put aside to deal with that in this authority. And it's quite right, that's far further than many local authorities have gone. But we still have to push our national government to meet the challenge that we all face on climate change. It's a big one. Many people have talked about it this evening already. You know my feelings on the matter, you know Sue's feelings on the matter as well, though she's keeping studiously neutral as mayor this evening. But as members of the Green Party, this lies at the heart of what we're trying to achieve, to make this a truly sustainable world where we can all live equitably. You can't do it all with techno fixes. A lot of it has to be done by behaviour change as well, and there's a great deal of education that has to be taken forward in learning how we can adjust to a warming world, and how we can mitigate that, and how we can reverse those changes. So in summary, I would say I think it's well worth supporting this motion. We will certainly be supporting it, and I would urge all councillors of all parties here this evening to support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There seems to be agreement within the council on the what, but not the how on green issues. And the council perhaps needs to develop more focused activities to move forward its aspirations through the scrutiny process. These ideas could be part of the solution. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Inglis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's quite a strong topic, isn't it? And the highlighted principles, I'm sure we all do agree upon and corroborate. And Councillor Brennan has sort of discussed the national side of it, but in the title of the motion, it said impact is felt in Rushcliffe, and that's something it is, because I feel that's something that is quite positive. It is a positive feeling. Rushcliffe, they are ahead of the game ecologically, environmentally, and climate-wise, and forefront of green technology. We've only got to look at what's been delivered in the capital projects. It is addressing this climate change with a roadmap. The carbon neutral plan aiming for 2030, and that's the date you're alluding to. We've got Abbey Road, recently a very inefficient site, and now it's going to be a showcase, highlighting Rush's ambition. It's looking at influence sustainability, energy efficiency, and supported by the desire of this council in challenging national planning requirements. It's challenged it through the county to have higher building standards, and it's something we're pushing, and hopefully that's something that will come back from government. We look at the arena, a great energy saving carbon footprint reduction already. The thousands of trees we've given away, the wildflowers recently, the wildflower package that's been given away, it's there to restore and promote the natural environments. And it's been mentioned tonight, the exciting horizon of the new crematorium and Bingham Leisure Centre, totally designed with green technologies for the highest efficiency. We're looking at 78% reduction on comparable new build leisure centres for Bingham. The cremator at the crematorium, it's 90% more efficient than other cremators. We move on. Rushcliffe is planning for the future, and they are implementing it at the moment. The food waste project that's just been alluded to, that's coming out this week. The recycling to go, they're going out educating schools and communities and we've started a rollout of electric charging points. We mentioned about the assembly. You know, we're not looking in at Rushcliffe through a national window. We are elected representatives for Rushcliffe. You know, we are their voice. I don't feel that's something we need. You know, we are in the community. It's our community, and that's who we're listening to. So I agree. You know, the climate change, the emissions, global warming, biodiversity, everything, they do need continual review. But I just feel that the COP21 conference that's coming up in November, it's got international heads, it's got leading scientists, campaigning groups. They're all coming together for a coordinated and accelerated action. And as I say, it's not for 2050, but by 2050 at the very latest. So I think given that the environmental bill will be delivered before anything else, I feel this motion will be a distraction, and that the government is responding already to national and international targets. So I don't think we can support this strategy request, although, you know, fully agree with that we do need to look at these environmental issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. I can't see anyone else who wishes to speak. So Councillor Jones,
Councillor Jones, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, did you want to come back? I thought that might be a legacy hand, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whilst all those good initiatives in Rushcliffe exist, we also have houses being built to building standards when the government postponed for several years the much higher standards of buildings. And this council should be putting maximum pressure on the government to bring forward those stalled building regulations which required far higher standards and much more locally produced generation. We do have all those initiatives that have been mentioned, but we also have things like drive-in fast food outlets on the edge of Ed Walton that have been built. And you just only need to stand there to see that a lot of people do not understand that climate change affects them. And that's why the Citizens' Assembly notion of spreading involvement in the wider community to think, whether it's at parish level or whatever, I think some process of that is the most exciting part of this motion, because change has to happen at an individual level as well as an aggregate level. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Robinson has raised his hand.
Yeah, just in response to that, we've actually led across the region about upping the standards for development. I think I mentioned it earlier, actually, Councillor Jones. I presented to all the leaders. We want to set absolutely new standards in development. And again, this is part of Rushcliffe taking the steer and putting it out to everybody else. And we need other people to come with us. We really do. And I think as this whole debate, everyone's agreeing with everybody, isn't it, at the moment? It's just the way we actually do it. And for me, because unfortunately, what's in the motion, it's about this bill. It's a private member's bill. The chance of it seeing the air in the next few years is so remote. You've got to realise there's a majority government in place. I'm sorry, but that is the way it is. And it is backing the climate bill and the environment bill. And that is the one that will get delivered. So if you want to see the biggest impact on our environment, then this government will deliver that environmental bill. And then at a regional level, we have the LEP, as Councillor Perrin talked about. I've got a big voice in that, particularly say with the power station, about leading the way in getting new houses that are built to a much higher standard. And I totally agree with Councillor Jones as well. And then within Rushcliffe, we own it. We actually own the environment where we actually live. And I think we are doing a tremendous job. Not perfect, we've got to improve. And just the thing in terms of these assemblies, are we disrespecting you as councillors? Are we here to make that and do that and consult? Our parish councils, our scrutiny groups, that's what we're there. And if we can't involve with the communities, then basically, I don't think you should be councillors. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Robinson. Again, I don't see anyone else that wishes to speak. So Councillor Gray, you reserved your right to speak. You're on mute.
Got it. Yeah, it seems there's a lot of agreement on the tenets of this motion, although some from Councillor Robinson at the end there about a disagreement over the citizens' assemblies. And I think we've already seen a motion fall tonight where we were concerned about the impact on officer time of our actions in this chamber. And I think the core of what the citizens' assembly is asking for, it's asking for citizens to, you know, as many minds as possible, as many of the bright and brilliant minds across Rushcliffe, where we have more graduates and PhDs than anywhere in the country outside of Cambridge, I believe, to come together and work on this problem which is the greatest problem that humanity has ever faced, the problem that could lead to our eventual extinction, which is why we as a council declared a climate emergency, I believe. The idea is for these people to come together, and as much respect for how I have for the people in this room, virtual room, and our pulling power for the 11 people who are currently watching on YouTube. I think that if we were to spread the net somewhat, we could bring in more of these great minds. Looking at the plan that we have at Rushcliffe, you know, we are, you know, we're doing well. You know, we are out there. We are pushing on this agenda, but looking at that plan, to call it a roadmap, maybe an exaggeration. We have a destination, we have where we are, and we have some places along the way, but we really need to fill in that detail. And this idea of citizens' assemblies is to help fill that. And again, as I say, I think it's that reaching out, that engaging the public, that bringing people in and taking them along with us. You know, we've already stated this is what we're doing and this is what we're here for. That's one of the major tenets of this motion. We're also here talking about supporting this bill, and as has already been said, it's a private members bill. It may not see the light of day. One of the ways we can help it see the light of day is to support it, is to push this through, is to push this forward, is to assert that we are for this, and this is one of the most important things to us. And certainly when I talk to residents, environment is something that's massively important. So pushing this forward and making this statement would I think greatly help the bill's chance, and therefore greatly help our chance to help in this situation. I think publicising the decision is something we could definitely do, and writing to our local MPs is something that again would help this motion, to help this members bill see the light of day. So although I know it's already been said that some members will not be supporting this tonight, I really believe we should. I really believe this is the best way to bring as many of the bright and brilliant minds of Rushcliffe to bear on this problem locally and globally. So I really do ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Gowland, to respond to the debate, please.
Thanks very much. I'm really happy about the strong support in this area, and I was really impressed by the list of things that Councillor Inglis listed that we're doing already. But I think there's a sort of misunderstanding on 2 points. The way we're going to solve this is going to require the sort of action that's happened over the last year over COVID. There needs a complete transformation of our society, unfortunately, or fortunately. I think it will be fortunately, it will be for the good. And that's why we need a citizens' assembly. We are representatives of our community, but we are not representative of our community. The vast majority of people in Rushcliffe are not spending their night watching this council meeting or participating in it or standing for election. We are, unfortunately, not normal, none of us. We all have a lot in common. We're prepared to stand for election. And that means we need to have the input from the people who are not prepared to spend their nights travelling to council meetings. Their lives are very different to ours, and they have different points of views and different needs and different requirements. And this is what Citizens' Assembly is about. It has to be selected carefully. You know, there's real cost to this, I'm afraid, to selecting people carefully, to bring in all points of view, so you actually get a representative input into the sorts of changes we need to make in the way our local society in Rushcliffe runs. And as Councillor Gray said, you know, Rushcliffe's in a unique position to do this because we have such an informed and knowledgeable community. And I really think if we supported this bill, a Tory-led council supported this bill and showed how well Rushcliffe how much pressure Rushcliffe put on this matter, it could really transform the future of it. So I really ask you to support this bill. This motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Since the majority party has again indicated that they do not support this motion, we'll do the same as previously. So depending on the sense of the debate, are there any councillors wishing to support or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to support or abstain by raising your electronic hand.
Councillor Gray?
For.
Councillor Mallender?
For.
Councillor Bansal?
For.
Councillor Thomas?
Abstain.
Councillor Major?
For.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Jem Walker?
For.
Councillor Cumberlack?
Abstain.
Councillor Way?
For.
Councillor Murray?
For.
Councillor Shaw?
Abstain.
Councillor Howitt?
Sorry, 4.
Councillor Gaunt?
For.
Councillor Begum?
For.
I think that's everybody, Madam Mayor, and the motion is lost.
There's Councillor Davidson.
Councillor Sims.
Oh, apologies. I'm sorry, Councillor Sims. Councillor Sims?
I was still thinking it over, sorry. For.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. That motion is lost. So now we have the third notice of motion to be put to council, and that's by Councillor Upton, seconded by Councillor Butler. So Councillor Upton, could you move the motion, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. But firstly, Madam Mayor, if I may, following discussion with Councillor Thomas today, I'd like to change a couple of words in my preambles, my printed preamble, if I may. Paragraph 2, change the word release to development and countryside. So it would read in paragraph 2 as follows. Delivery of these additional homes has put an intolerable strain on infrastructure and local service. Moreover, it has required and that's to change, development of large swathes of our countryside and change the nature and character of many of the rural settlements in the borough. That's part of my preamble, it's not the actual motion. So with your agreement, I carry on.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this motion is timely because the government is proposing a new planning act that arguably will make the biggest changes to the planning system since the Second World War. This motion is all about the duty to cooperate with adjoining councils when preparing our local development plans. Members will no doubt be aware that at present we are preparing the extension of our local plan up to 2038. We are not against consultation with local councils regarding local plan reviews. Indeed, quite the opposite, as we are a member of the Joint Planning Advisory Board, which is a group of local councils that discuss the housing needs of the Greater Nottingham area. But what we are against is the legal duty to cooperate. Historically, this legal duty to cooperate has not served Rushcliffe residents at all well. Back in 2014, when our current plan was being formulated, despite numerous appeals to the Housing Minister, we had to include many thousands of houses in Rushcliffe to meet the needs of Nottingham City, precisely because of this legal duty to cooperate. But make no mistake, unless this legal duty to cooperate with adjoining councils is removed from the planning bill, then history may repeat itself and Rushcliffe may have to release more large swathes of its countryside for housing to take the overspill from Nottingham City. The latest government method of calculating the housing need, which was set out in a member briefing in December last year, shows that Nottingham City has an estimated shortfall of 8,640 homes against its adopted sites at the moment between 2020 and 2038, whereas we in Rushcliffe have a buffer surplus, if you like, of 3,830. We believe that Nottingham City can and should meet its own housing needs, rather than the surrounding areas such as Rushcliffe. As this council prepares its legal obligation to agree the extension of its local plan to 2038, it calls on the government to remove legal duty to cooperate with adjoining councils from its planning bill. We are not against voluntary cooperation with adjoining councils. That's what we do, but we are against being legally forced to do so. Therefore, I propose the motion that this council prepares its legal obligation to agree the next local plan. This council calls on the government to remove the duty to cooperate in the forthcoming planning bill and calls on Nottingham City Council to be more flexible and adaptable to deliver the new homes needed in the city going forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Butler to second, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very happy to second the motion and I'll reserve my right to talk for now. Thank you.
So Councillor Gray, please.
Councillor Gaunt is going to kick us off, I think.
Councillor Gaunt.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just think this motion's asking for entirely the wrong things. The City of Nottingham is confined within its boundaries on all sides. There are very few sections of the city boundary that meets the open countryside of the rural urban fringe. And of those points that do, then the countryside area tends to be part of a borough, Clifton being the perfect example of this. Therefore, Nottingham has very few opportunities to build any more housing within its already densely populated urban area. To look upon the City of Nottingham as an independent entity separate from its neighbouring county is inconceivable to anyone with a slight understanding of how our historical county has evolved. Approximately 50% of Rushcliffe residents commute into and rely on the City of Nottingham for employment. We use the city to make our living and then return home to enjoy the tranquility and open spaces of our borough. Many of us could not afford this luxury if it were not for the well-paid jobs the city provides us. Again, to draw an invisible line between the City of Nottingham and the borough of Rushcliffe is simply not possible. The two main hospitals, the two universities, the Nottingham train station, the National Indoor Arena, nightclubs, restaurants, museums, the list is very long. All of these valuable assets that we as residents of Rushcliffe benefit from daily take up land in the city. We expect the city to provide these things for us, yet we expect the luxury of saying that we can't use some of our land for their housing needs. It seems very strange. In a recent House of Commons briefing paper that came out at the start of this year, they quoted the Lyons Housing Review of 2014, which calls for more cooperation across local authority boundaries when identifying suitable land for development. The LPEG recommends changes to planning policies to strengthen the duty to cooperate. The MPPF was amended to include an expectation that statements of common ground will be prepared. Why are we as a borough seeking to abandon our cooperation, legal cooperation with the City of Nottingham, despite the strong recommendations of these bodies? Recent announcements from Robert Jenrick, MP, state that new house building in the UK will focus in the Midlands and the North, and is focused more on economic growth and political issues than any actual local need. The government made a manifesto pledge of building 300,000 homes every year, and this seems to be because building new homes creates economic growth. We know that every pound spent on a house being built creates £1.40 in the economy. So of course, this is of interest to people who are able to make money from the system. We're building to build and not building for need, unfortunately, at the moment. I agree fully with the Conservatives that the borough has been inundated with far too much housing, but to blame the city and seek to stop cooperating with them is not the answer. The anger of most local residents in Rushcliffe is largely around the location of the new housing on Greenbelt and in floodplain. And it's not the feeling that the housing wasn't needed. It's the choices of us, really, as a borough council, to where those have gone that's caused the problems. So this does reek a little bit of an attempt to shift the blame. We also need to ask the question if there is a shortage of housing at all, or if it's a problem of affordability and availability. Currently, 20% of households in England rent their home from a private landlord, around 4.6 million households. Simply building more homes that are too expensive for local people does little to solve the problem and may well increase the private rental market. There are currently 24.4 million dwellings across the UK. With a population of 67 million people, this equates to about 2.7 people per dwelling. Not really that much of a shortage. The problem isn't necessarily a lack of housing, it's a lack of affordable housing and a problem of affordable borrowing. The questions that we should actually be asking in this motion to our government is not what can we do, how can we stop cooperating with a city that provides us with so much, but rather, can the government re-look at its housing formula? I have a discussion around what that's actually generated by, and at the moment I believe it's an algorithm, and we all know about the problems of algorithms, those of us who work in the education sector this year. Okay, so we need to ask about that question. We also need to have a discussion about making over housing needs, and look at reducing the appeal of housing as an investment opportunity for people, because that's what's driven up house prices, not a lack of houses. There are questions I would like this motion to ask, but instead, as usual, it will go to a vote, and unfortunately, we're going to take the easy route, which is to blame the city for our numbers, and then we're going to pull up the ladder and go off back to our lives and leave them stranded. So I think it's the wrong thing to be
30 seconds.
doing about. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Gaunt. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll be supporting the motion. There's a number of points that Councillor Gaunt has stated, which I think are fair, which is about the excessive price of housing, which I think is more a function of landowners and deals. And there are ways that the Conservative government post-war found to resolve that. And I would strongly recommend that the Conservatives here look at what was achieved by the government post-war that led to much more affordable homes being built generally. But I do think Rushcliffe got stuffed at the last plan. We were due to have 9,000 houses, which was quite a lot, and it suddenly went up to 13,500. And it's led to massive estates, quite often soulless estates, like on the slopes of Sharp Hill, with high levels of car dependency, with a few footpaths thrown in between. And the last thing Rushcliffe wants, or anybody wants, is more of the same. So yeah, we'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Mallender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, there's a difference between a duty to cooperate and wanting to cooperate with people and just being told to roll over and accept whatever housing figures get thrown at you. And that's the problem. As Councillor Jones has just said, there was an assessment carried out when the regional authority was removed some years ago, and it was the regional authority who'd put these vast housing figures onto Rushcliffe. That went away. Rushcliffe did its own assessment, came up with, I think it was about 9,000 as what was required. And then we had these numbers put back on us again. And it wasn't something that anybody from, I think, any party on the borough accepted, but we were lumbered with it. And now we have this duty to cooperate. Cooperating is fine. Being told this is what you do is not. The city has plenty of space to develop additional housing within its own boundaries. There are large areas that have yet to be developed within the city. I'm thinking particularly of areas like the Island site that have been laying dormant for years and years and years. And there is room to put additional housing in and still have green development as well. Places like the Broad Marsh, which is going to have to be addressed at some point in the future. I'm all in favour of having that as a green space, but that could have some housing incorporated into it as well. The last thing we want to see is huge amounts of Rushcliffe taken up with large estates built over greenbelt land, and even land that's pre-industrial use that has high biodiversity now, where people are forced by current nature to be sort of car dependent, too far away from the jobs that they're having to get to. I think the wording of this motion is rather problematic. Currently, I'm just listening to what people are saying on this. I'm undecided whether to support or abstain. I think I'm maybe moving towards supporting, but I'm going to hear what other councillors are saying. I do think it's a bit ridiculous to be, following the blame game of, oh, we've got too many houses to develop, let's blame the city council. Well, we seem to have a thing of certain people blaming the city council for everything under the sun at the moment. Doesn't really help, doesn't really get us anywhere. What we need to do is look at the housing need and housing affordability across the country as a whole. And, as people have said on other motions, the East Midlands has not had a favourable time of it in terms of investment. And certainly when it comes to infrastructure and transport infrastructure, we don't have good public transport infrastructure in this region. If we're going to have housing built across Rushcliffe, then we would need far more investment in public transport infrastructure. We don't have that at the moment, but we do have a housing requirement, and I think it behoves us not to be building sprawling car-dependent estates across the greenfields of Rushcliffe.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. So we're just having a discussion about the time. I really apologise, but if you want to move to a vote on this, I'm afraid Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Clark and Councillor Gray, you're not going to have an opportunity to speak. I do feel in the interests of democracy that Councillor Thomas could have a short time to speak, but I'll have to limit that to a shorter amount of time from the 5 minutes. So Councillor Thomas, do you wish to speak?
Eastleigh has been hit very hard by developers targeting areas outside the green belt to provide housing for Nottingham. This makes little sense, as it means that rural areas separated from Nottingham are providing the housing it requires. The city needs to bite the bullet and look at ways to regenerate and redevelop itself and rethink retail, particularly given the huge changes that will be needed to deal with the longer-term societal impacts of COVID. Nottingham City can no longer rely on ripping up our green fields to provide its housing sites. While green space inside the city is of course very desirable, it should not be newly created at the expense of established countryside, habitats and valuable agricultural land. Brownfield land should be developed first. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for being so succinct, Councillor Thomas. I'd like to move to a vote now. So are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand.
Madam Mayor, don't I reserve my right to speak. Have I missed out then? Or,
well, we can either move to a vote now, or we can adjourn now, and this will have to go to the next meeting.
Oh right, okay. Well, no, we'll move on.
So also Councillor Upton won't have the right to respond. So I do apologise for that, but it is now 10 o'clock.
That's okay. That time goes quickly.
Are there any councillors wishing to object to or abstain from this vote? Please indicate your desire to object or abstain by raising your electronic hand.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Murray, how would you like to vote?
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Jen Walker. Councillor Walker.
Just had to not make everyone deaf. It's going to object, please.
Thank you. Councillor Gowland.
Object.
Councillor Gray.
Object.
Councillor Bansal.
Object.
Councillor Gaunt, I can't actually see you, but are you, have you raised your hand?
Yeah, object.
And Councillor Begum?
Object.
Thank you. I hope I've asked all councillors who had raised their hands.
I can't see anyone else. Only legacy ones.
So the motion is carried.
Thank you. So we're not doing the questions will be asked at the next council meeting. I do apologise for that. So this concludes the business for this evening. Enjoy your very late dinners if you haven't had them yet, like I haven't. And I will see you